So, welcome to the Leadership Passport, the podcast where we dive into the journeys, challenges, and insights of school and education leaders from around the world. Delighted to introduce my guest today, Dame Alison Peacock. Alison is currently the Chief Executive of the Chartered College of Teaching, based in the UK, a charitable professional body that seeks to empower a knowledgeable and respected teaching profession through membership and accreditation. Prior to joining the Chartered College, Dame Alison was Executive Head Teacher of the Wroxham School in Hertfordshire. Her career to date has spanned primary, secondary and advisory roles. She's an honorary fellow of the Queen's College, Cambridge, Hughes Hall, Cambridge and UCL, a visiting professor of Glendia University and a trustee for Big Change, the Helen Hamlin Trust, and advisor to the Institute for Educational and Social Equity. She's a director of the Edge Foundation, has honorary degrees from the University of Brighton and the University of Bath. Her research is published in a series of books about learning without limits, offering an alternative approach to inclusive school improvement. Welcome, Dame Alison.
Thank you very much.
So I hear that an interesting and unexpected fact is that you actually disliked attending school. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. The reason I wanted to become a teacher was because I didn't want children to have to experience what I'd experienced. Not that anything horrific happened. I just felt like I was just one of these cogs in a big machine. I didn't really feel particularly noticed or valued. And so when I became a teacher, I was really keen to make sure that I got to know all the children really, and as where I could, also got to know their families and, appreciated them for who they were, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, fantastic. So to start things off, a little bit of a different question. So if your leadership style was a song or a movie, what would it be and why?
It would be I Did It My Way, I think. It would be the Frank Sinatra, because I've always, I'm not exactly a rule breaker because I like to stay within the law, but I do tend to interpret things in the way that I think will be most meaningful for the children or most purposeful for the mission that I'm on. So I do tend to, I'm not just going to do what you tell me to do. I'm not just going to follow the rules, and I will always try and do my best to make education as meaningful as it possibly can be. So, yeah, a bit naughty, really.
Very good. Very good. So what has been a defining moment in your leadership journey? Are you able to pinpoint one or two inflection points along the way?
Yes. So when I was a deputy head teacher, I became a deputy head teacher of a primary school, having previously worked in secondary education. Ultimately, I ended up in primary and I was a deputy head. And the head teacher that I was working for, I went to that school because I really liked her. But she began to become confused and began to sort of lose her way. And as deputy head, it was an incredibly challenging time because I'd got all the staff relying on me. I'd got the head teacher relying on me, and I was trying to do my best to sort of lead the school in that position. But the problem was that, you might have a conversation with the head teacher the night before, she'd agree something, the next morning she'd forget that she'd agreed it. And so in a way, that meant that when I became a head teacher, I'd had the best possible grounding, which was whatever you do, don't do it the way that she did it. And that way it will be better, because you couldn't hand her a document because you wouldn't have it back. You'd have to make sure you've got duplicates of it. She would manipulate people. So if you were in a staff meeting and the meeting would go on, you didn't want to be the first person to leave the meeting, because if you were the person that left the meeting, you saw what happened, you got criticised. So everybody would stay relentlessly. So the opposite of building a trusting environment, the opposite of an inclusive style where everybody's views really count, it was the opposite of that. And that was because she was becoming ill. So when I became a head teacher, the second really important inflection point was leaving that school, I chose to go to a school that was in dire difficulties. So it was a school that had been described by the inspectorate as being for children being unteachable, That's nice, isn't it? And on my first day of headship, I was met by the advisor who said, you've got to turn the school around or it's going to be closed. So there was really only one way, and that was to improve the school. The only way was up. And that was a huge challenge. But it was also incredibly formative because whilst I was engaged in the challenge of thinking, oh my goodness, what have I got here? How am I going to work with the team to improve the school? Not only was I trying to do that, I also got contacted by the University of Cambridge, where I'd been supporting them writing one of their Learning Without Limits books. And they said, oh, we'd love to come and see how you're going to transform this school. And I remember thinking, well, I'd love to see how I'm going to transform this school. I've got no idea. And they said, we want to apply for some research funding, and can we come and document what's happening? And I just remember thinking, don't say yes, don't say yes. And then I heard myself saying, that would be great. So I had the kind of termly inspection, had the prospect of the university sending academics to research what was going on, and I had children who had been described as being unteachable. So that was quite an inflection point.
I can imagine, and it's somewhat surprising how much of a common thread that is with other leaders in terms of being in the midst of a really challenging situation and just being forced to somehow find your way through that. So how did you end up navigating that? What were some key challenges along that way?
Well, it's exactly as you said. It is about finding your way through. I use that phrase quite a lot. I think, and that's the case for individual children as well as for circumstances that happen. Because whenever you're in a situation, whenever you're leading a school or leading a classroom, come to that matter, things happen that you aren't expecting, and you have to find a way through. So you have to find a way through of either talking the child down who's got rather overexcited and angry, or the parent who's stormed in the door, or I don't know. You have to sort of work through what you're going to do about it. And I think having a kind of reliance on some really core values has really helped with that. So I realised when I was being researched myself as a teacher for Learning Without Limits that building trust is fundamental to me. So having a trusting relationship, and trust is reciprocal, by the way, so it's no good you just trusting other people, they need to trust you. So that reciprocity, creating an environment where everybody knows their value, not just the convenient ones, everybody. So that's the child who finds it very hard to engage with reading, or the child who is very angry, or the parent who doesn't want to come and talk to you, and that's everybody. That's really fundamental. So, and then the third principle that has always sort of been at the heart of my teaching and my leadership is one of how to build agency. So when I was a teacher, it was a sense of co-agency, the child having agency, the teacher having agency. Together we could go anywhere. Because when you've got that, and I know that in your school you're very keen on this notion of student leadership and student participation, I absolutely think it's at the heart of the most successful schools. Because that way, it's not just you having all the ideas, it's not just you having to assess all the work, everybody's working together. And that means that it's incredibly exciting, actually. It's an irresistible place to work, whether you're a child or a member of staff.
And particularly with how quickly technology is advancing these days, we don't really have a choice. We have to involve the children to, help us with that, because quite often they are much more advanced in knowledge and use and of all these technology tools we find at our disposal these days.
Mm. I mean, I when I talk about formative assessment, I talk about, if you've got 30 children in the class and you've got 31 assessors in the room, because everybody can be involved in engaging in assessment. Everybody can be reviewing what they've done today, thinking about, striving for their personal best, striving to improve on what they scored last week. And it's not about ranking, it's about that sense of achievement when you're offered challenges and you know that you're not being overlooked. So, that principle that I talked about very early on in this conversation about why I wanted to become a teacher, classrooms where you have a sense of purpose and challenge, where you know that turning up really matters and doing your best really matters, because you're going to prove to yourself that you can do even more. And gaining the recognition from your colleagues and your friends and your peers and your teacher is really important in that. So, and technology helps with all of this. I think there's a huge kind of opportunity around how we can use adaptive assessments to really make sure that we no longer have classes of children who are sitting there and you say, and they might say to you, Miss, we've already done this. And you say, oh, well, you haven't done it with me. Well, actually, that's not good enough, is it? We need children to be challenged in their thinking.
Yeah, 100%. So, what's one mistake that has shaped your leadership approach?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. I think I'm just trying to think of a nice juicy mistake to share with you, but I think that generally speaking, I always want to see the best in people, okay, and I always expect people to come up to my standards. So the mistake that I made when I joined the Chartered College of Teaching is that I was wanting to promote the college anywhere I could because we didn't have a budget for marketing. And I was approached by a TV company who said, would you like to come and speak on a documentary? And I thought, oh, well, that's good PR, not really questioning who they were or what the conversation would be about. And then it turned out to be Russia Today. And that caused quite a flurry at the Department for Education. So not my finest moment, and it came from a good heart, good space. It came from wanting to engage in debate. It came from wanting to share ideas. But I mean, I'd never even heard of Russia Today. I didn't even know what it was. Anyway, never mind.
Now
I'm
you'll
still
never
here.
forget them. Yeah.
I'm still here to worry everybody. They didn't even say it was. They just said it was RT. I thought, oh well, I suppose I probably should know what that is. But anyway.
Fair enough. So this next question is a little bit presumptuous maybe, but how do you handle imposter syndrome or burnout or tough decision making, maybe even decision fatigue perhaps over the years?
Okay, so one of the things that when I did my MPQH, I remember the guy who was leading the training talking about how lonely it was to be a head teacher. And that, you would have to be making decisions all on your own and tough that was and so on. And I remember thinking, I don't think I want to do this job. I don't want to be on my own. I've never, pretty much, unless it's a safeguarding issue, which is really, really confidential, share with people. If I'm worried about something, I share with people. If I'm trying to find a way through in terms of sorting out a problem, I seek a collaborative response. If I've had a bad day, I will tell the woman in the supermarket while I'm packing up my shopping. So I am not the kind of person that stores everything away. I've never been the kind of leader that thinks I need to have all the solutions. I think it's much, much stronger, actually, to work in a collegiate way and to share decisions wherever possible. So I've always delighted in the company of my colleagues. I've never really felt lonely in my leadership. And I've seen other colleagues who really struggle with this. And I think if you have a model in your head of the leader always has to have the answer, or the teacher always has to have the answer, you are likely to be quite lonely, because the chances are you're not going to be able to share with anybody else. You haven't got a clue what you're going to do next. Whereas if you're happy to be collectively clueless, but nevertheless always lead from the front, always work the hardest that you possibly can. So it's not about just freeloading and playing at being a leader. It's modelling doing the best work you can in terms of leadership. And that means mucking in. So it means if there's no one to wipe the tables in the dining room, then, that can be me. There's no one to clean the toilets. It's not about just doing the things that I think is appropriate to do. It's about how we all work together as a team. So, yeah, it's probably not the best answer, but the imposter syndrome bit of it is, well, I seek reassurance. And there are times, honestly, when when you were reading my bio at the beginning of this session, I was sitting there thinking, God, is that really me? So yeah, there's always imposter syndrome, but it doesn't have to be crippling, does it?
And it's interesting, some of the things you mentioned there, going back to your earlier comments about trust. So you're talking about collaboration and openness and transparency. What wonderful ways to build trust with your colleagues and your community.
I think it's the only way to build trust, actually. It's no good saying I want to build a trusting community and then doing something completely different. You have to live it, don't you?
Yeah. So what might be a leadership practice or habit that has changed the game for you?
Well, as you can probably tell, I'm not shy of talking. So when I became the head teacher of that school that was in difficulty, I told everybody this was going to be a listening school, because I needed to understand where everybody was in terms of what they felt was going really well and what needed to change. So I think seeking to listen is really vital, because you can have a view of what you think might need to happen, and it might not be the right one at all. And in my role now at the Chartered College of Teaching, we try really hard to be apolitical. We work with colleagues across the world. We work in all sectors. It would be very arrogant for me to assume that I knew what, on behalf of my members, what I ought to be saying. So we're constantly seeking to garner opinions, to ask responses to surveys, to encourage people to attend focus groups. We really want to represent a range of discourse that, nevertheless, as a profession, we're far more united than we are divided. And there's always going to be points of fracture. So there will always be disagreements around things like group work or no group work, all these kind of things. Is it about discipline, or is it about working through friendship to be able to find ways forward? I don't know. There's always extremes within this, but I think listening and trying to respond to what I hear is the leadership practice that I'm not sure it comes naturally, but I try.
Amazing. So that's maybe a nice segue then, as we think about moving from the past into the future and the future of education or school leadership. So how do you see education or school leadership evolving over the next decade?
Well, I think it depends where you are in the world. I think at the moment in England, we have quite a disgruntled group of young people. And it's not just in response to COVID. I think when you look at the international survey data, it shows that our young people are amongst the most unhappy, most sort of dissatisfied, and their mental health is on the decline, and that's a huge issue. And we've also had an increase in the approach to sort of direct instruction and much more sort of use of PowerPoint and shared planning for teachers, which is designed to alleviate workload. But if that means that you've got a demotivated group of students in front of you, I'm not sure that it does actually decrease your workload. So I think there's, as you said earlier, I think technology is a really interesting way of developing the classroom, but I certainly don't think it's about putting on the PowerPoint and pressing play and that's it. You don't need the teacher. But I think there's much more interactivity that can be achieved through using iPads and so on. But then we need to really set a premium for those areas of the curriculum that need collaboration and need human collaboration. So music, dance, drama, sports, arts, all of these areas of the curriculum, we thrive when we're with other people, when we have an audience, when we can share, when we can debate, when we can co-construct. And so it's not about, I don't think it's about one particular methodology. It's about a range of a repertoire of methodologies that suit the subject areas, suit what's being taught at one particular time, and building those skills amongst our young people. And we know that they need to be much more critical consumers of what they find online, because that's increasingly alarming. And it is very, right now, it's very difficult to actually distinguish between what's truth and what's parody, because the actual truth, as I see it, is becoming more and more, you can't satirize it, it's becoming ridiculous. So we have to be able to share that with the young people together. We all need to be trying to really navigate our way through this. And I don't think it's a case of the teachers have all the answers. I don't think they do. I think we all need to work as a community to actually make sense of what's going on. That will become more and more of a priority, I'm sure, going forward.
Yeah, and you're talking about kind of a sense of nuance, that kind of differences between communities, that there's not a one size fits all kind of approach, that perhaps technology, but adaptive technology is a bit different, but definitely that nuance, and even having a sense of humor and fun as part of what we do. It shouldn't be serious
Vital.
business all the time.
No, it's vital, isn't it, to be able to build relationships. And I think that gets a bit of a bad rep, certainly amongst some of the more traditionalists. But actually, of course, it's fundamental. You need your students to really want to learn. And what's going to motivate them to want to learn? Well, they need to feel that it's cool to learn. It needs to be, rather than being the opposite. And they want to please their teacher. And if they don't want to please you, you've got a pretty bad ride, really, as a teacher. I think relationships are fundamental. Obviously, it helps if you know what you're doing. So building your pedagogical skills, but also your subject skills, are really important as a teacher. And that's at the heart of the Chartered College of Teaching. We want the best possible teachers. We want teachers who can, inspire their colleagues as well as inspiring their children. So all of these things come into play, don't they? They matter so much. But a sense of humour doesn't go too far amiss, does it?
Yeah. No, I'd agree. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring school or education leader?
Do it. I think we need great leaders, but don't feel you need to be on your own. Don't feel you've got to sort it all out. Don't wait until you think you know what all the answers are, because you never will. So I think it's such a privilege leading a school. It really is. And when I left headship to take on the role at the Chartered College, I knew that I wasn't going to go back. So I literally got in the car, drove away. I have never been back. I left at Christmas 2016. I've never been back to visit the school. I just had to sort of box it all up in my head and leave those set of memories. And they were really, really special memories of being in that school and leading and working with so many people. It was a real privilege. So I would say, if you can see it as that, and not that I'm suggesting that every day is going to be easy, because it won't be easy, but then something that's easy isn't really worth doing, is it? You want something that's going to, every term, and I'm still like this now, and I haven't been a head teacher since the end of 2016. But every term I get to the point, where you're sort of a week off the end of term, and the holidays are just in sight, and you kind of go weak at the knees because you're like, I can't do another week. And then you have the holidays and it's blissful. And then you kind of think, oh, actually, I could go back. I could do it again. I can remember. But even then, on the first day of term, thinking, oh, goodness, I don't remember what you do. There are so many rhythms to the school year. And goodness me, if they were ever to reduce the holidays, I think teachers would probably collapse in a heap, because you just need that period of time, don't you, when you switch off to the point that you properly switch off. I mean, I remember when I was first at that school, and it was the work was ridiculous, trying to move everything that needed to be moved. And in the holiday, that first summer holiday, I got to the point where I was sitting out in the garden. I remember sitting under a tree and thinking, what is the name of the woman on the front desk? Couldn't remember the name of the school secretary. It is a very good sign that I had completely and utterly kind of just, my brain had gone somewhere else for a while. No bad thing, as long as it comes back.
No, we've all been there, I think, definitely. So if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about a school or education leadership, what might that be?
Well, I would love us to have more resources. When we're teaching children that come to school without enough food to eat and without enough money to have their uniform and somewhere to study, that feels very, and it's beyond what you can do as a teacher. So I would love it if all children didn't have to suffer that. But beyond that, I think I want school to be somewhere that is a really joyful place. I want a school to be somewhere where, you've got a collective sense of purpose, a real sense of energy around what you're doing. Everybody's different, but we're all on the same journey. We're all trying to achieve more than we thought possible. That's what makes it such a privilege. And it's not that everybody is the same, and we need to make sure that children from whichever starting points feel really valued for what they can contribute, but also that there are really high aspirations. And that's what I mean about personal best. If I'm sitting next to someone and they've got 20 out of 20 in their times tables test, great. But if I've got 18 out of 20 this week and last week I only got 14 out of 20, I can see my progress. I can see that I'm on a journey. And it's that sort of sense of, your own kind of personal endeavour, really wanting to do the best you can. And also really being proud of your friends when they make progress. And that's the same for children as it is for teachers. We all should be proud of each other when there are successes, because that's what makes things better, doesn't it?
It sounds like a wonderful place to be to me.
I'm sure it's like your school, don't you think?
Well, I think we're all, I mean, the number of similarities in conversations, those kinds of sense of well-being and belonging and connection are all things we're always striving for in our communities and within our schools. And I don't think it's something you ever quite achieve or are satisfied with, but something, aspirational you're working towards all the time.
Yeah, don't forget, I'm telling you this. I'm telling you all of this with this kind of golden halo of it all being wrapped up in a box that's been left there since 2016. So I'm not talking to you kind of with the harsh reality of what happened yesterday. So having said all of that, though, the aspiration, as you've just described, is the right one. The aspiration is for that sense of belonging. The aspiration is that it should be a joyful place to learn. It won't be every day. I don't want it to sound unrealistic, but it's where you're heading. It's when you've had a good day in school, what are the factors that have made it a good day? It's really important to remember those.
Yeah, amazing. All right, so a couple of quick questions to finish up now. So, your favorite book on leadership?
Oh my goodness! Favorite book on leadership.
Or it could be your favorite book in general, something that's stuck with you.
Well, if I'm honest, the book that really has influenced me is a book by Susan Isaacs that was published sort of 1910, something like that. It's about early years. And she had a school in Cambridge called Malting House School. And what she wanted to do was she was teaching the children of academics, and she wanted to give them an opportunity within this school to be able to show what they were capable of and build their intellect and their physical capacity and their imagination and so on. So that book, the work of Susan Isaacs, is really inspirational to me because it's about believing in the art of the possible. And it's also about how you create the conditions. You don't have to plan everything within an inch of its life. It's about creating the conditions that enable discovery. So I would say that's one of the most influential books that I'm sorry it's so long ago. You wouldn't be able to find it anywhere. Or maybe you can. But I think, Susan Isaacs.
Yeah, great. One thing you do daily that helps you lead better?
Well, I eat quite a lot. I'm not good if I haven't had my coffee in the morning. What makes me lead better? I think I know this sounds terrible again, but when I wake up in the morning, I always want to get on with what I'm doing. I'm relentlessly optimistic, relentlessly positive, relentlessly ambitious. When I sort of decided to start the Chartered College of Teaching, to be the founding CEO of the Chartered College of Teaching, I just remember sort of thinking, well, we could do this and we could share ideas around the world. And now it's happening. It's really happening. And I'm speaking to you in Kuwait, and isn't that amazing? And we've got tens of thousands of members. It's kind of unbelievable whilst also being really exciting. So I think my leadership is always galvanized by a sense of, well, what next? Come on. Who knows what emails might have come in while we've been speaking on this podcast?
I'm not sure too many people I've spoken to really look forward to those unread emails.
My emails are quite filtered, I have to tell you, so I don't get thousands. I just get some really nice ones. Anyway, go on.
Lovely. Very good. A leader, past or present, you admire?
Leader I admire. Well, in England, I admire Estelle Morris. I think she was a great Secretary of State. I think that, I've forgotten her name, Christine, who was the Chief Inspector of Schools. Oh, for goodness sake, can't remember her name. Anyway, she was really great. Tend to be women, have to say. Tend to be people. Mary Jane Drummond, who was an academic at Cambridge who worked with me on the Learning Without Limits books. I can honestly say that I was more worried about her opinion of what the school was doing than I was about Ofsted's opinion of the school. Her opinion was way higher in terms of, well, her standards were way higher, actually. So if you managed to meet her standards, you were going to be fine with Ofsted. So it's those kind of leaders who show the way and who listen. And then there's great people like Maya Angelou. I think I quite often quote her work. Just think, that those kind of people help us when times are difficult. In fact, I've got a quote from Maya Angelou right now on my Blue Sky account because I did leave Twitter at the point when Elon Musk took it over. But the quote says, from Maya Angelou, "Every storm runs out of rain." And I think that kind of reminder, that pithy reminder that even when things are really difficult, challenging, it's not going to go on forever. Those are quite useful things to hold in mind. So.
Very good. And finally, best advice you've ever received?
These are really hard. I probably should have done my homework before the interview. Best advice I've ever received. I think it's advice about not being too harsh on yourself, not always expecting yourself to be perfect. So perfect being the enemy of the good. I think it's quite tempting sometimes to constantly keep striving and constantly want to keep improving, and actually that can end up being a negative if it goes too far. So I think, perfect being an enemy of the good is quite a useful thing to remember as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, it's been wonderful chatting with you today, Alison. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, etc. Drop a comment below to let me know anything you'd like covered in upcoming episodes or suggestions for future guests. You can also connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn.